I've been thinking about school safety and homeschooling recently, and this has been one of the topics that my wife and I keep bouncing back and forth on. Now, my daughter recently this week had an active threat drill. And obviously that gets you kind of thinking on, one, the preparation that schools are taking into account for the world that we currently live in. But we also try to factor in what's the point of schooling nowadays anyway, just given the curriculum. Later on, I'm talking about probably grades 3 and up. Now, the early years are absolutely critical to learn the basic information that we all should learn, reading, writing, mathematics, and so forth, as well as social situations. But it comes a time where when is schooling almost just a formality as opposed to practical? So with the fact that things are getting crazier and crazier nowadays, it's definitely been something that has been top of mind. And as a former law enforcement officer, I kind of know how these drills work. And it's great to have a plan, but it's never practiced in high stress scenarios. It's one of those things that you have to look at from various different lenses and just make sure that the staff and the students are completely prepared. And then you think, what's worth the risk of even having your child in a school nowadays, whether it's public or private? So my wife and I were seriously considering homeschooling. We've done it for various different reasons, not just necessarily the world we live in, but the point of academics and kind of what they're covering, because your school year is only as good as the teachers that teach you. We've been fortunate to have great teachers for our child. Kind of diving back into law enforcement perspective is what these drills prepare the kids for, the basic protocols. I've already talked about this. This is important. You have to have a base level foundation, and we've talked about training in other videos. But what they don't prepare for, again, is these high stress scenarios. Now, most teachers aren't trained for stuff like this, and we could probably get into a whole nother topic when it comes to teachers carrying and having tools available to them inside the classroom. But that's obviously up for debate, and there's various different opinions on that. The response time, one of my most recent videos is talking about response time. Now, this is a huge critical factor. Depending on where you live and the location of the school, this can vary. It can range anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes to 8 to 10. And obviously things can escalate and a lot more things can happen as the clock keeps ticking. Now, the gap between lockdown procedure and actual protection is also a big thing, right? You have to have things in place at the school that are going to be early notifications to let people know that the threat is there and what type of threat and where it's located. Now, budgets are limited, and video surveillance and having eyes on every corner and every side of the school and entry point is something that is probably not possible. Schools are now taking into account various different security measures and protocols, which is great. It's at least something. But going back to thinking, is it always going to provide the adequate protection that is necessary in schools without turning it into a fortress and making it feel like a prison when the kids are going to school? So all of these things are taken into account when we're having conversations on, at what point is it worth it to simply just go in a different direction? So I'm very curious on what you may think. Let's talk a little bit about the fear versus preparedness balance. Do we expose our 6-year-old child to this level of awareness? We've talked about the color code of awareness by Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Cooper. And at what point do you start exposing them to situations that are going to make them more fearful at that age? So it's finding a balance in that regard. We've talked to our daughter about the tools that we have in the house. She's well aware of that, the dangers, the importance of understanding that and what they're used for. But again, they're just kids. She already knows about situational awareness, kind of gauging how she reacts, and she's doing very well with that on the playground, if she's playing with other kids outside of the school setting. So we're very proud when it comes to that. The psychological impact on kids doing these drills repeatedly. It's one thing to bring awareness to it in the school. It's another to, continually bring this up. And I trust that the teachers and the administration are making intelligent decisions on that. But it just comes down to, you need to have at least some sort of training, but is it enough? Probably not. Is it practicing specific scenarios that are actually going to translate into a real threat? Probably not, but at least it's a good start. So what we're weighing as parents is the traditional school model, socialization, structure, sports activities. There are a ton of options now that we're exploring from a homeschooling standpoint to kind of get away from that traditional route. And I'm curious if you've explored these. I'd love to learn a little bit more about what you have used or what you have explored. Now, homeschool, controlled environment, your traditional route versus individual learning in safety. So as working parents and having other things to do, school is great because it has some sort of controlled, structured learning environment, but also it's kind of watching your kid for the day, which is absolutely, sometimes it's a necessity. If you translate or if you transfer over into homeschooling, now it's a little bit more hands-on. We do have the flexibility in order to do that, which is great, but it's something that we feel as parents being a little bit more involved in the education is also important. So there's definitely a balance there. The fact is we're not alone either. Other parents that we have talked to and that we know are also considering. You go online, you can find various different options, but really I think it's a transitional period in society in general, weighing what schools are teaching, what they're allowing to be taught, and what your beliefs are as parents. So it's one of those things that is a constant conversation. And let me be clear, it's not just about the threat. Safety is a huge component. Having your kid go to school and you wonder, is it going to be this school's turn when it comes to experiencing a threat? It's a scary, scary thing. And as parents, you like to have control over what your child has experienced, especially at a younger age. It's a hurdle that we jump through all the time, and we constantly think about it. From a coaching perspective, I would like to see, we want to see kids at the rink. We want to see them show up. If we flip the script a little bit and look at it like, well, what if parents are now starting to take them out of sports activities and allowing them to leave the house? So again, it's a very fine balance of being too paranoid and being protective and understanding what the realities of the world are. Now, what we're going to do regardless of the decision, we're definitely going to be focusing on teaching situational awareness for our child. I think that's something that is able to not only help currently, but it gives her the tools in order to utilize them as she grows older and faces even more threats in environmental situations and being around people that are just absolutely batshit crazy, if I'm going to be honest with you, and don't have her best interest in mind. We want to empower her without scaring her, having the fact that these realities that we live in are there, and exposing her to news articles and situations and really having it come from another perspective as opposed to your as a parent. Kids will value what their parents have to say up to a point in their life, in their young lives. So understanding that, maybe showing real world scenarios and having that resonate and register to help reinforce some of the situational awareness and tools that we're providing her, I think are important. Open communication about safety without creating paranoia, letting her know that there are people out there that will have bad intentions, both from a social standpoint as well as a physical safety standpoint. So she knows to be aware, trust your gut, and tell an adult at this point if there's anything that ever triggers that threat. To wrap things up here, I don't really have an answer yet. Homeschooling may be our path. A lot of things to factor in. Curious to hear what you have to say. Thanks for watching.